My name is Randy Gregg. I'm the Executive Director of the Portland Parks Foundation. Thanks for being here. This is the fourth in our series of conversations. What is our conversation series called? Suddenly having a blank spot. Anyway, reimagining O'Brien Square. And tonight we're going to be looking at downtown futures, retailing and living and working in the post-pandemic downtown. I want to thank US Bank for sponsoring this talk series. And we have some other sponsors we'll thank in a little bit for the overall effort that we're doing. But tonight we have three great panelists who are going to be talking about our downtown and other downtowns. So, what's the future of downtown with soaring office space and retail vacancies and empty hotel rooms nationwide? Just about every city is asking this question. The past 30 years were really the golden era for large cities. This kind of, as Sten van Neuburg from Columbia Business School wrote in November 2022, there was kind of a virtuous cycle of improving amenities, education and cultural institutions, entertainment, low crime, job opportunities that attracted employers and employees and young and old to cities. And as you can remember, Portland was at the forefront of that, really indeed kind of playing a leadership role. Some of us who've been around here for a long time remember when people from all over the world came here to study us for our urban design, our light rail, streetcar, our brownfield redevelopment. But of course, a lot of factors have changed. We're starting to see exodus of folks. We're seeing a surge in vacant offices and storefronts, and we're facing the prospect of declining property taxes and public transit revenues. And, this is what is being described as potentially an urban doom loop by some researchers. As fear of crime grows and the number of homeless people increases and the fiscal ability of the government to address these problems shrinks, the amenities of city life are very likely to begin diminishing. And we're, seeing that, of course, in cities across the country. This morning, we read about, if you caught some of the media attention, an Eco Northwest study where we're seeing evidence of this. Our central city has 31% less foot traffic from visitors compared to pre-pandemic, whereas downtown Seattle is coming back faster. It has recovered more rapidly with 14% decrease over pre-pandemic. And then closer to home, we're facing the existential crisis of Vancouver, the Couve, as we affectionately call it in Portland, actually outperforming us, attracting new residents and new development. Other bad news, the Mason Airmen building we read about this morning went into foreclosure. That follows Dunaway and Hilton Portland downtown hotels in January, went into foreclosure. And so there's a lot of, gloom and doom. Now, our little O'Brien Square isn't going to fix any of these trends, but maybe it can be a spot of hope. And there's probably other spots of hope, which I think our panelists are going to share tonight. I'm going to briefly take you through what we're up to, just for those of you who might be new to our conversation tonight. I'm going to share screen again and find the right deck. And hopefully somebody will holler if this isn't the right deck. So what should a new downtown public plaza be in 2023? Who's it for? What is it for? Who should design it? Who can bring it to life? And so we'd like to soundly say you, our community. And we brought a great team together to make that happen. The Center for Public Interest Design at PSU, the Harvard Loeb Fellowship, and Portland Parks and Rec, obviously. We have a great group of sponsors who are helping us out with this effort, including the Loeb Fellowship and North Star Foundation, some great civically minded architecture firms, Travel Portland, Metro, the Schlesinger Family Foundation, and some great in-kind support from MVP Capital and Metropolitan Group, who are both neighbors of O'Brien Square. As if you don't know this, O'Brien's going to be demolished. The Jersey barriers went up a few days ago, and deconstruction should start to happen in about 3 weeks, I'm told. And so we have an opportunity here. Our public squares in Portland have largely been architecturally driven, and programming and events often only fit into the cracks of the design visions. And Park Block 1 offers an opportunity to really rethink this. Bring activities to the square first, find out what works and what doesn't, and that can inform a permanent design when there's money available for that permanent design, which might be several years. We're going to have a March 8th open house at the old Finnegan's, and we'll have that'll be all day. You can come in. PSU is creating some great interactive pieces for people to sort of help visually realize their ideas for the square. We're also having some focus groups where we'll go deep with residents and retail and hospitality and arts groups and street youth and other groups. And then the team, the Harvard team and the Center for Public Interest team will work very hard on March 9th and 10th to bring those ideas to visual life, and then we'll share them out Saturday, March 11th in a public forum and open house at the old Finnegan's. So we hope you can stop in on Wednesday, March 8th and weigh in, and also stop in and see the results and tell us what we got right and what we got wrong. And then we also have a survey which Sabrina can put in the chat for me. And with that, we'll start our program. So our first speaker is Christopher Callett. He's a Loeb Fellow in 2012, and he's currently the chair of Real Estate Development, Architecture, and Urbanism at UC Berkeley. He's an award-winning architect and urban designer, academic, and real estate developer. He currently engages in large-scale redevelopment projects in the Bay Area, engaging real estate developers and municipal agencies, all seeking a more socially equitable outcome. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris. Chris is on mute.
Unmute.
There we go.
Chris, unmute, would you? Thank you, Randy. You stole some of my thunder. I'm going to revisit a few things, but that's fine. I'm really delighted to be included in this series, looking at the redevelopment of cities and specifically O'Brien Square. I don't exactly qualify as a local, but in fact, I was born in Portland, lived there till I was 7, and then grew up in Minneapolis. And lately, my daughter went to the University of Oregon and now lives there with her husband. So I've been kicking around Portland for the past decade. So pleased to be able to be back and hopefully help out. We remember, as Randy mentioned, the decade or so before COVID, when cities were experiencing, he described it as a golden era for large cities. That's when we were rebounding after the 2008 financial meltdown, and high-skilled, high-paid workers were flooding into cities, New York, Los Angeles, Boston, San Francisco, and Portland was also a leading player in that trend, chasing high-paying finance and technology employers who were also moving back into cities. Though all was not good. With all of this heated economic activity, our cities got more expensive, while we saw housing insecurity hit crisis levels, and deep social inequities or inequalities in our society became strikingly more apparent. And due to COVID, in early March 2020, we witnessed, as Randy already touched on, this massive migration response, fleeing urban centers for the suburbs. Now allowed to work from home, many transitioned from temporarily renting in the suburbs to eventually purchasing a home there and staying. And we still really are not sure where this is all going to settle out. That's going to take a few years, but it's pretty significant. And of grave concern today, however, according to countless urban researchers who have been closely tracking our cities, the shift to working from home spurred by the COVID pandemic has potentially led to what some are calling an urban doom loop. Randy mentioned that as well. But briefly summarize, what is that? The exodus of the affluent from our urban cores, setting off 1, surging office and retail vacancies, 2, declining property taxes, property values, and city hall revenues, 3, massive public transit shortfalls due to reduced ridership. And again, as Randy mentioned, this has all led to less consumption and spending in cities, so less city hall money to provide those services that make cities attractive to both live and work in, and less eyes on the street. So more crime and homelessness. And I emphasize this, at least the perception of increased crime and homelessness. The perception is really a big deal, which just feeds this downward spiraling loop of challenges cities face, but now potentially without the revenues or constituencies to reverse this trend. Now, Portland has been in the national press a lot, fairly or not. You are all aware of what brush Portland has been painted with lately. So I will let you all think about and decide where Portland truly is on the urban doom loop spectrum, because I believe that an honest answer to this question should factor into your considerations for how you approach the remaking of O'Brien Square. I'm an optimist. I'm also a student of urban history and cities. I know that cities are the most resilient artifacts in human civilization. Cities are constantly reinventing themselves as they experience low and high points. Fortunately, there are several perspectives that challenge the demise of our cities, being in the death grip of an urban doom loop. Noted Harvard scholar Ed Glazer and famed futurist and urbanist Richard Florida are both champions of cities and downtowns and offer a host of reasons to believe that our cities will do what they always do in times of crisis. They will most definitely adapt, evolve, and reinvent themselves. And let's put a light and exclamation point on this, because in fact, that is exactly what all of you are gathering to do, to propose a new chapter in the life of O'Brien Square. We would not even be holding this forum if you did not believe that cities could change course. Back to Glazer, as an economist, he points out that conventional economic theory tells us that real estate markets are highly elastic and they adjust. So as market values go down presently for office spaces, this allows for potentially other types of office users to get into the downtown market, or even other more attractive uses like housing. And this plays into one of Richard Florida's principal criticisms of our industrial age thinking about downtowns as one-dimensional, work-only central business districts. In fact, he argues the pandemic may have merely speeded up the process we have long been witnessing, where downtowns have been transforming themselves into 24-hour places for quite some time, with a mix of uses and more downtown housing being built, which has supported great clusters of talent and innovation. And that is the certainty that Florida argues for, that our productivity, innovation, and inventiveness stems from the creativity of human beings being in groups, namely in cities. And therefore, for the foreseeable future, we are going to figure out ways to make them work. The human desire to reinvent the city, I believe, is alive and well, again, witnessed here in your effort to reinvigorate O'Brien Square. A recent special section in the New York Times suggests that signs of life are all around us out there after the pandemic, in places large and small, in big city downtowns, and even small town main streets. Before the pandemic, as a means to recapture its downtown's vibrancy, a decision to build a new downtown library in Nampa, Idaho, a population 100,000, about 30 miles west of Boise, set the stage for something unexpected. Further investments in its downtown during the pandemic, including expanding sidewalks to support outdoor dining, helped restaurants to thrive. Now, leveraging American Rescue Act plan monies, storefronts and streets that were emptied first by shopping malls and then online retailers are filling up again in this small town. Supported by its new library, outdoor dining, and monthly block parties, now sponsored by the city, and a new 6-story multifamily building presently under construction, led one new shop owner to conclude that I think people still love the idea of our downtown. I really do. The pandemic drew newcomers to Utah in huge numbers. Enticed by a hot economy, a lower cost of living, and the outdoors, downtown Salt Lake is thriving, and its population is expected to double in the next 2 years, its downtown population. Because while only 60% of its office workers have returned downtown, tourism and nightlife have surged past pre-pandemic levels, and this has been supported by tons of new residential product being built downtown. Same thing in Seattle. Housing costs have spiraled in Mountain West towns like Denver, Boise, and Salt Lake during the pandemic, resulting in the working poor's struggle to find housing and chronic homelessness, a symptom known all too well here in Portland, but now popping up nationwide. Austin only fleetingly was halted by the pandemic, as it was being transformed by dizzying waves of investment from many sources, not to mention expansions into this market by Apple, Tesla, and Samsung. As this once quiet center of Texas government has become a bustling high-tech hub, its downtown community remained true to its mantra of keeping Austin weird. And the live musical capital of the world doubled down to keep its music venues booming downtown, which they presently are. But once again, what seems to be the most devastating impact of post-pandemic COVID is the rise in homelessness, now surging in places like Austin, where it never significantly existed before. Where I'm living right now, which is in Washington, D.C., while I'm on sabbatical, we are truly experiencing an office vacancy crisis due to our national government's huge demand for office space, coupled with its continued work from home accommodation. Presently, we are hovering around 60% office vacancies. This has heightened the issue of converting office buildings into housing units for developers and municipal leaders alike, which is really not that easy. Due to traditionally large office building floor plates, their conversion to housing is often quite difficult, since there are inefficiencies associated with the needs of light-seeking units such as housing. But possibly, more importantly, until office valuations plummet significantly, and some say as much as 40 to 50%, they just do not make financial sense to convert. But aside from that, with a large rebound in tourism, a busy food, and intern happy hour scene, and countless new infill housing developments in walkable transit service neighborhoods over the past few years, the state of vibrant downtown urbanism in our nation's capital is actually quite good. Chicago may represent the same that a lot of older legacy cities are experiencing, like DC, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. Something of a split recovery. In Chicago's Loop, the downtown heart of the city, it is estimated that 1/3 of its storefronts are vacant in its core office building or business district, while things are much healthier along Lake Michigan, the Chicago River, and Millennial Park, areas most popular with tourists and visitors, which are rife with public art and street musicians and activity. Large trade shows and concerts in this city last summer brought in record downtown hotel occupancies, and restaurants and rooftop bars overlooking the river were again at capacity. A theme appears to be emerging here for cities, a shift away from a focus on office life and more toward the arts, culture, gathering, music, and entertainment might prove to add more resilience to cities in the future while galvanizing their community's sense of purpose. And as Randy mentioned, our friends to the north, Seattle, are experiencing much of the same. Demand for hotel rooms and tourism drawn to the waterfront are back at pre-pandemic levels, and more people live in new housing built downtown than in 2019. But its retail sector is struggling mightily, tied to extremely low return rates in downtown offices. Perhaps in Amazon's hometown, there's no more complicated relationship between it and the traditional bricks and mortar retailers it has ravaged. But this has actually spawned some very creative resistance strategies, not only in Seattle, but in resistant downtowns throughout the nation. Pop-up, micro retail venues, food halls, shop local movements, and even municipal experiments to subsidize small retailers who move into vacant stores downtown are providing a model not only to fight online shopping, but thrive in our post-COVID retail ecosystem. Now, I want to briefly share with you some design forecast research developed by Gensler, a leading multi-practice international design firm, suggesting 8 meta trends and strategies that I do agree with that will play a part in the transformation of cities over the next decade, and which might also guide how we approach some of our combined work in O'Brien Square. Number one, reclaiming experience. The absence of experience we all faced during the pandemic continues to remind people how valuable human interaction is and how critical our spaces are to enriching our lives. The live-work connection. The future of cities is being defined right now, and particularly by their ability to re-energize the connection between live and work. And that's something that is still being worked out, but needs to be addressed. Number three, building transformation, adaptive reuse, stranded assets, buildings are creating development opportunities that obviously can regenerate cities and transform outdated office buildings into thriving residential living and other uses. Number four, attainable housing. As we redesign urban communities and business districts, multifamily housing might finally address the shortage of attainable housing. Number five, decarbonization. Decarbonization of the built environment continues to be the imperative of our time and will continue to be as long as we can imagine. Number six, mobility. The shift to new forms of electric and autonomous vehicles and also autonomous public transportation will allow cities to redesign underused urban districts into mixed-use live-work communities. Number seven, equitable design. The demand for buildings and urban districts and spaces that have a higher purpose with a positive social impact will continue to drive design decisions. And finally, flight to quality, something we always experience in economic downturns. Tenants will continue their flight to quality, giving a competitive advantage to prime locations with a mix of uses, and I will emphasize experiences. In conclusion, if there's one singular lesson I could convey here this evening, it is this. A city is not an accident. A city is not some socioeconomic organic thing that just grows or decays on its own. A city is a reflection of a collection of values, cultures, and exists in a condition in time. And most importantly, is the product of conscious actions and decisions, or inaction and indecision, made by its citizens, electeds, the business community, but also by its entrepreneurs, visionaries, and artists. It is always up to us what our cities become. It always has been. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for that great overview. Much to talk about there. But we will save that for the Q&A portion of our program. One thing I want to remind everybody, feel free to talk as you will in the chat, but we'll make the Q&A available after everybody's spoken, and put your questions for the panelists in the Q&A, because we're only going to really pay attention to that for questions. So the chat, just have fun and be polite, but we'll be focusing on the Q&A. So next up is Stephen Lean. So Stephen has been in the neighborhood for a long time, for 18 years. He has led the store Under You for Men. It's a flagship store for his chain, and it's been located in the West End, right across the street from O'Brien. But he has a longer history in the neighborhood, starting with his first retail store in the mid-'80s, a ski shop that was just a few blocks away on 12th. So he's been in the West End a long time. He's an amazing community advocate, the executive director of Travelgate Portland, and he helped start and now is chair of the Friends of O'Brien Square. And I like to, think of Stephen as the ambassador of optimism. So with that, Stephen, take it away.
Oh, thanks, Randy. I appreciate that. I am optimistic. When you're a downtown retailer, I think you have to be. I am going to share some slides here for everyone, a little bit of visuals of what's happening in the West End. And as we go through the process, there's a little bit of positive, there's a little bit of negative, And we'll follow up with some of the things of how the West End retailers and that can maybe help out with the O'Brien Square progression of a new park. So let me share this real quick. Well, and as you can see, first off, can you get a confirmation that you can see? This is the
All good.
fantastic, thanks. This is Under You for Men in the Travelgate Portland's Visitor Center. We're a quarter of a city block in downtown Portland in the park blocks. We've been there at that location, as Randy mentioned, 18 years. Underwear, swimwear, gym wear, resort wear products from around the world. And we're across the street from the park, as you can see, and that's a current photograph. It's snowing outside. That's actually looking out the front window. The Travelgate Portland's Visitor Center is operated by Under You for Men. We average about 25 groups that stop by each week. It's a vital link to the gay community, to the city of Portland. We actually do a lot of marketing in Seattle, Vancouver, BC, San Francisco. This is not Travel Portland. This is Travel Gay Portland. Been around for over a decade, and we operate also things like a bag check for the public. And Travel Oregon out at the airport refers people to us all the time because we're the only public bag check. We operate a social media calendar for the LGBTQ community. Free refreshments, things like that. So we're the place to stop to get information for that community. And there's a big link to that. And I'm actually going to go back a couple of slides here. As Randy mentioned, my first business was in the neighborhood, and that was in the early 80s and 90s. And that history is important. And I bring up that we have Travelgate Portland, but that history is important because O'Brien Square is just off of Harvey Milk. And Harvey Milk is a LGBTQ activist out of San Francisco, is what that street's named for. And in the 80s and 90s, O'Brien Square was really important to the LGBTQ community. And there might be an opportunity to connect to that sometime here in the future. We used to have events, pop-ups. We used to have fundraisers in the park. This was the days of AIDS, and we had many fundraisers in the park. There was 6 nightclubs very close by. Those nightclubs participated in whether it was a concert during the day or even sometimes events at night. Those were back in a heyday when Bryant Square actually was a safe, fun place. Now, it wasn't until the AIDS crisis and economics caused a lot of those clubs to change. And of course, the gay street was basically something that faded to the past. There's just one gay club left on the street. Now, pop ahead, we've we're back here in the West End. Now, West End thrived in the 2017, 18, and 19, a lot of new shops and that. Now we have 24 active retail shops. Most are local. There are a few national shops. Vans is one of them, but very, very few. They're pretty much locally owned and operated. We're close to some nationals that are across Burnside and the Pearl District. And of course, there's some new nationals on their way, including our new Crate and Barrel. And we have 9 new retail spaces that are under development right now in the area. The Ritz Tower has just 1 retail space. That's actually going to be a move of retailer off of Broadway, and it's going to be selling higher end products of like Rolex watches and that. Now, most of the shops are actually reporting good sales. We're getting close to 2019 numbers for most of the shops. There are a few that are really struggling, but most are doing pretty okay. Now, that's contrary to what most people think because there's not as many office workers downtown, but we do have a tourist connection and we actually have some nightlife connection. It's coming back, but just not fast enough. Now, there's a lot of empty spaces. And I've got 3 challenges that we have here in retail. Empty spaces, footfall, that's how many people are walking up and down the street, and the BHRC. A little bit more on that in the next few slides. Now the empty spaces. 52 empty spaces in the West End. Can you believe that? It's a lot. 66% of our retail service and service spaces are gone. Now that's within a 2-block area extension around the park. Actually, it goes about 3 blocks out. And it's amazing that this much of our retail is gone here in the West End. Now, I added in there another figure. I picked this up at the economic forum put on by the Portland Business Alliance yesterday from their stats. 8 million square feet. Randy mentioned this at the beginning, of empty office space in the central city. I don't know how much is in the West End, but my God, there's a lot. My own building is only 25% occupied above me where I have the retail store. Now, all this is a loss of employees. That means a loss of customers, loss of services that support us. If we don't have the restaurants, where's my staff going to go to lunch? How far do they have to walk for other services? And of course, there's blight and dark areas at night and fewer eyes on the street. Now, there's some good news out of all that. The rents are lower and there's more opportunity for new businesses to come in, and they are. Now, the third challenge area is footfall. Footfall is that traffic. Who's walking up and down the street? Now, this is the numbers presented yesterday at the Portland Business Alliance's Economic Forum. I want you to take a look. Overall, down 50% still. But look at the office workers. Office workers down 65%. Now, the tourists down about 30%. Thankfully, my business has a lot of tourist business. So I've got visitors coming in from all over the place, primarily because of Travelgate Portland is here. And that brings people into the West End. That's a good positive note. But the work from home is here to stay. And a lot of that concern, the concern is safety. Of course, there's a lot of good function of working from home as well. Now, lack of services is another concern. So when we have these empty spaces, it does support work from home. And those of us in this community, we need to figure out ways to engage those spaces, bring the services in, and go back to whether it's culturally engaged, restaurant and service engaged. Now, here's an interesting statistic. Did you know Wednesday is the busiest day right now downtown for football or the traffic on the streets? Wow, not quite for retail though. Retail, Saturday still number 1, Sunday number 2, and then of course, number 3, Wednesday. By the way, it used to be Friday. Matter of fact, I can remember when we used to always be open Friday nights till 9 because it was actually one of the busiest retail days years ago. So this is an important chart to get your head around. Our numbers are really, really lagging behind our fellow cities, whether it's Salt Lake City, Denver, Austin. Our numbers are terrible in comparison. Now, we have another challenge. If you're a retailer, and also a challenge for the park, it's the BHRC, the Behavioral Resource Center for the Multnomah County. Now, this is brand new. This just opened in December. This is a new facility, and it is so much needed. The retail community is supportive of it. The business community is supportive of it. The developers, I have some that I talk to all the time as we're working on these challenges. They're supportive. But there's a major impact on the neighborhood, and the county has not been taking responsibility for it. Obviously, camping and sanitation, those are issues. If the Portland Loo doesn't exist in this part of the city. Drug deals, using, it's gone rampant. And there's no good neighbor agreement. They've refused to sign one so far. We're working with them again tomorrow. County commissioners are joining our meeting. I'm hoping we're going to convince them, and hopefully they follow through and help solve some of the problems. I'm concerned, greatly concerned about the effect of this on the open space of the new park. Right now, the big problem is it's a warming center during the day. Well, that wasn't the plan when we were first told about it, when it was first being planned. If that warming center went away and it became the Behavioral Health Resource Center with mental health treatment and residential facility that it is, the neighborhood would be better off, and we need to help solve that problem. So BHRC, yeah, we've got some problems coming from it. The mental health crisis, safety, shoplifting, resources from the community all being taken. This is just right outside my store. These photographs were all taken within like a 30-minute period. Now, retail is coming back. This is the positive side. There's a couple of new shops just around the corner, and they are coming in. They could not have been here if it wasn't for the lower rents that the pandemic has brought for us. I can remember wondering, how am I going to stay in downtown Portland? Well, now I can. The rents are lower, but also there's new opportunities for shopping local and new opportunities for new entrepreneurs. Now take a look. This is 9th Avenue. This is this morning. This is what it looks like. Finnegan's Toys is on the left, the new Ritz-Carlton Tower on the right, that photograph, and the new Shake Shack all opening up. There is development and there's new things coming. That's a beautiful retail plaza that's going to be through the center for dining outside and walking through, and as part of the Greenway also in the future. Now, the West End Retail can be a partner for the park. Programming support, participation in financial and marketing, pop-up events. We used to do them years ago. I did it in the 80s. I had a ski event right in the park. Businesses can help adopt the park, maybe a week a year for cleanup or support. We can support our employees to volunteer. We can use that open space for meetings, a gathering point for emergencies. When the sirens sound and there's a fire alarm, you have to meet somewhere. A safety point is a great place. And dropping off for the visiting tours. There are so many tour buses that are coming into Portland. They need a place, a gathering spot, a place to be welcoming for sales tax-free shopping. So those are the positives. And I want to thank you for hearing a little bit about retail, but also let you know that there is Friends of O'Brien Square. It's on Facebook. Search for that group, join us, and you'll help follow and see more about the other events where you can be part of this redevelopment of O'Brien Square. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. If you can take down your screen share, that would be great. Great presentation. Totally living up to your to the name I've given you, the title I've given you. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Eric Zimmerman. He is the Central City Senior Advisor in the Office of the Mayor, and really the point guard on troubleshooting and reactivating downtown Portland. He has previously served in deputy and assistant city manager roles in Medford and Tigard, and he's also served in a number of military posts with the National Guard. So welcome, Eric, and tell us what's happening in City Hall to help our downtown.
Thanks, Randy. Let me just kind of to preface and expand on Randy's introduction. I think the role that I've got in City Hall, most folks who are working with me know that I'm really focused on all things revitalization of the Central City. And so in this conversation, it's not just downtown, but it's actually the Central East Side, Pearl, South Waterfront. And so in those areas, we're really we've identified with the neighbors some key elements that are preventing folks from wanting to come back downtown, or structural things that mean they're not down there to start with. And so we've got city resources right now who are focused on cleaning up the right of way, right? This is just that general feeling. If you can see it, if you can feel it, if it's improved, some of the things that we lost over the last few years, that's a key indicator for people if they want to come back downtown. So we're not just putting city resources to that, but we're kind of expanding block by block, working with Clean and Safe, our ESD in the area, to kind of reignite the ownership of that first 10 feet outside your front door. And that is having a really positive impact in the areas where we're getting buy-in. But it's kind of the way you eat the elephant, because things got so bad. We have to dedicate city resources, but also provide kind of that incentive for everybody to take care of their own space. Obviously, we've talked a little bit tonight about just the return to office or the change in office environments, and that is certainly impacting Portland, is definitely impacting downtown. The return foot traffic and those areas where we're seeing a difference is downtown versus the Pearl District or Goose Hollow. And what we know is that is largely based in the fact that downtown is lacking in residential units. And so if you don't live there and you're working from home, you're not likely to be in downtown. So what are we looking at for that? We're looking to convert commercial buildings to residential buildings, those that qualify, right? That's a much bigger endeavor than maybe it sounds just on this title, because if you think about the types of buildings we're talking about, most of them in the greater downtown area are not going to automatically be able to be converted. And then there's also just a great deal of financing that goes involved in that. But we are working at it. Whatever we can do to incentivize and develop in downtown to create residential units is something that we think is part of a resiliency strategy moving forward. And that's why we've seen different parts of the city recover at a quicker pace than others. And then we compare ourselves to other downtowns, and we see that to be true as well. But then in terms of, Stephen's got so many years of data and experiences of being a shop owner in downtown. And he can tell you those days when they used to be busy and when they didn't used to be busy, and now it's changed. And we are actively engaged with the large employers in downtown, the government employers in downtown, and with a market research firm, a communications firm, because we realize that the work week has changed. We realize that some folks are coming back, others may not, but there's finally recognition that there is something missing from a lot of self-reported by workers, which is the social aspect of the work week. And so while we all have different schedules that we keep, or that our employers want us to keep, we've identified, and Stephen supported it, is like Wednesday seems to be the most active day of the week in downtown. And so you're going to start seeing the Every Wednesday campaign, which is a lot of employers have different policies. We're trying to get everybody aligned so that you kind of feel that critical mass. That critical mass will make it feel more alive. We'll make sure that events that are down there there's a little bit of a value proposition, value added to coming back downtown, coming back to the office, thinking about taking certain meetings in person, but everybody doing those on the same day or two. And then we think our hypothesis is that will grow into the other days on each side of it, Tuesday and Thursday. And as was noted, our weekends are actually getting pretty busy and almost back to normal in a sense. But we recognize Friday and Monday are very different in the work week equation nowadays. But what we're trying to do from a city perspective is everything we can to incentivize folks to come back down, incentivize employers to support their folks coming back down, so we feel that critical mass. And then those are all great ideas, but it doesn't mean a darn thing if folks don't feel safe when they come back downtown. And so public safety pops up and almost takes over in every one of those topics of revitalization of downtown is public safety. What it looks like, what it feels like, what the actual or perceived experience is, that has been very challenging for Portlanders. It's been very challenging for visitors. We are in a situation where with less people, you have the more likeliness that you'll have antisocial behavior. With more antisocial behavior means less people want to go to an area. With the types of stuff that we're seeing in downtown and the types of activities taking place in downtown, we have to get very targeted in stopping that type of behavior. I think most everybody knows that if you're a private business today, you've either considered or you actually have hired security, private security, in a way that 5 and 10 years ago you never considered. The ESD, the ratepayers in this area, pay an extra fee to have more cleaning and more security for their areas. They've ramped that up. Those folks are doing, when you see something gross on the street, it is often clean and safe, and the other ESDs that are cleaning that up on behalf of the neighbors of that area. And that happens every single day, multiple times a day. So it's really, it causes a bad narrative for everybody. So we need more people downtown, but we need to address the things that keep people from wanting to come downtown. And so that's kind of the overall, the challenges that we're facing from a downtown perspective. I want to just, in terms of O'Brien Square and as it relates to all this, I grew up in Portland. I've lived here my whole life. And it hurts to admit that parks, especially parks in the central city, are really not a place that families come to visit. And I think that's fair to say. And I think it's for good reason. I find them difficult to spend time in. And I think those with kids would have a difficult time, particularly in our north and south park blocks, which should be the gem of our city, but they're not comfortable to be in right now. And that we have to talk realities, and we have to, kind of get down to brass tacks with it. O'Brien, I think, was one of our first parks who really suffered this type of fate. It has been a place that even as a kid, I was barely allowed to go to, but it's certainly in the last decade or more not been a place that you would want to spend time in, even in the busiest lunch hours, as I've seen on some of these other previous calls or webinars. We talked about the lunch hour was really a positive area for that place in the past, but even then, we've really lost that park. And so we have to have really, great concern from that. The mayor's office, as it relates to the future of O'Brien or Park Block 1, Randy, it's really about what is it going to take to program the thing for 24/7 or as close as possible, because we know that a park in the central city, if it is not programmed 24/7, it is likely going to face the challenges I've just talked about. And so interested in a traditional park, the way we maybe all think of it, is not something that seems very feasible or a good investment for the long term. And so we're trying to take that seriously. I think we're just being very clear is that parks in the central city are being used, they're being abused, frankly, by certain folks who want to do negative and antisocial things in those parks. This is very related to drug use. It's very related to the specific types of drug use that we're facing. And I think we can look at O'Brien and in this last several weeks and months that a lot of parks in Portland, we're doing pretty well at making sure that they're not just large campsites. And I want to make sure this is not just it's not a homeless anti-camping aspect here. What we've got to deal with at O'Brien is a drug use and kind of sales and the fencing of items that happens at parks that are kind of unused by the general public. They become areas where you can smoke up, where you can deal, where you can wait for clients to come through. And we've seen that happen. Once we get it fenced up, once we get it prevented from people entering it, like we did just a few days ago before this construction started, that behavior goes to other places and it doesn't congregate quite as much. But that's the future of O'Brien if we're not very, very specific about its realities. And so there are, a lot of ideas out there in the world for what O'Brien could be. I've seen a number of these webinars and the ideas that are out there. I am happy that we're talking both in the short term, but also in the long term with respect to what O'Brien will be. I think from the mayor's office, it's, returning that space to the public, and so the public can have joy in it is a huge priority, but also preventing any future disarray is incredibly important. And I think we do that through deliberate planning, through deliberate programming. And we also have to recognize that I think this park, in this neighborhood anyway, this park above most can be a beacon for really bad stuff if we aren't diligent there every single hour of every single day. So that is maybe more negative than I want to be, but it's because there's such a good possibility here. Steven stole some thunder, but I'm happy he did, because this neighborhood, and I tell everybody that I can, I've told the Ritz this, Steven and I have talked about this, I tell Randy this neighborhood's history with a couple of fabrics of the city is actually really rich and maybe not as known widespread as we want. And that the Pride Plaza that is up just a few blocks away is something that I think the city is interested in seeing what that can grow into. The city just got, I think we're at $1.3 million of a grant to help us improve Pride Plaza. And if you think about the geography of this area, Pride Plaza extending down or somehow incorporating down Harvey Milk 3 more blocks and ending at O'Brien Square, or maybe it's Pride Square in the future, or some, dignified person from that community, whatever have you, there's something there. And I've heard about it from the neighborhood. I've heard about it from other people who know that there is a great number of the LGBT community who's been displaced from this area, both in entertainment and in how housing is accessible in the area. There's something there that's very historic to this neighborhood. And the other thing that I think is really important is, while we lost one of our pride and joy in the what the cart blocks were, you know, and really they got pretty cool in the recession times of the last decade. But the food cart culture of Portland is something that is more at risk than I think the general public realizes. And we should be doing everything we can to be more deliberate, to find ways for them to be more permanent in our public spaces and to be the fixture that I think we all expect them to be, because anybody who spends time around food carts know they're complementary to a neighborhood, knows that they become a destination place. So there's a good amount of public input right now that's very interested in how those can be complementary to the square, to the park, whatever it is. And in recognition that Portland is losing those locations because parking lots that house them now are less attractive for those owners, and because the Oregon Health Authority and Multnomah County's Health Authority have increased the food safety demands or the plumbing demands in a way that was not the case just even last year. It is going to take more, and it's going to be deliberate if we want them to have a future in Portland. And I think Portland does. And so I offer those all because I hope they're considered, right? We hope that those types of things are considered as we look at both the short term and the long term for what this neighborhood, this beacon in the neighborhood can be. And the hope is that it's a beacon for good and not a beacon for bad. It is challenged because it has one of the most challenging neighbors in the city of Portland, being that it's next to the BHRC. And any of us who spent time there, we know that there is a great need for the services, but there's also a wing of our society that is taking advantage of the folks that come in and out of there, and they're doing bad stuff in and around that area. And a park that isn't programmed full-time all the time, more so than Directors Park, more so than Pioneer Courthouse Square, we don't want it to fall into disarray. And so that's some of the balance that we're having take place there. And it's, you know, from a perspective of anybody that works or lives nearby, I think everybody gets that. This becomes a difficult conversation when folks who are not spending time in that area have some ideas for what a park must be, instead of what we can achieve in that area. And so I've heard so many perspectives in this webinar series that it's important to keep that in mind. And with that, Randy, I think we can probably move to any questions.
You bet. Thank you, Eric, for your candor and insights. I'm gonna, when we get the Q&A up and start seeing those questions, do the panelists have questions of each other? Stephen, as somebody who's going to be beaming in from outside, what comes to mind in what you've heard so far?
Well, I love the optimism that Eric brought to the table. I think that optimism is really important from the city side. I saw some good points there. It's good to hear the city actually kind of coming to the table. It's refreshing, and from a retail perspective, I'm pleased with that. So thank you, Eric, on that side. Christopher also basically played right into where I confirming of what I thought was happening on a national basis. So these are positive things, and I appreciate the confirmation from a national perspective of how we're fitting in and where some of the direction needs to play. I do see a bright potential for this park. Block 1 can be the start of something new in this part of the neighborhood.
I'm sorry, I sort of misspoke there. I was actually not that I want to hear what you had to say, Stephen, but I actually meant Chris. Oh, you're on mute.
I caught that, but Stephen so gallantly jumped in with aplomb and positivity that I let it go. It was great. Well, I think my reaction to listening to Stephen and Eric's observations, and thank you very much, I really appreciated them. They were both super thoughtful. And the thing I really liked about them is that they were real. So in other words, we're not starting, or at least we're not having a discussion starting from a place that isn't real. I mean, you were able to own the tough things going on. And that's the first place to be if you're going to start to address them. So I appreciated that very much. I did appreciate Stephen's enthusiasm or belief that retail can work and get better, because it's working in other places. And I do agree that you get the perceptions that Eric and reality that Eric is identifying around, safety and crime is probably your biggest barrier to recouping, people wanting to be downtown for lots of things. But it basically sounded about right, what you both said, what I sort of expected, what I've experienced myself being in Portland once, twice a year over the past 5 years. Yeah.
So we have some pretty challenging surroundings that aren't about social services. They're just, the physical reality of the site. The Pittock block, is mostly telco equipment now. The historic building, for those of you who don't know it, directly to the west of O'Brien. The Bank of California building, which is gradually gaining more telco, is also suffering from the same thing as other buildings, but turns a classic and beautiful modernist architectural expression into a blank face in the park. There's basically on three sides, there's really, building faces and buildings that are not supporting the park. You look at something like Jameson Square in the Pearl District, and you've got a lot of uses, housing, affordable housing, uses around it that support the park. How do you think we can overcome, this in terms of really thinking about how do we activate that area when we don't really have the retail, the employees and the residents directly adjacent to it?
I'd like to jump in there, Randy, if I can.
You bet.
First off, I think, any of those neighboring businesses around O'Brien, the choices that they had to make, the design of those buildings that's been noted in your other webinars, challenging, but also based on what was going on in O'Brien, you wouldn't have been foolish to kind of turn your back because it was so negative of an impact in such a way over the last several years. So we've got some design issues to get through, but I've had brought to us in City Hall ideas that support the smallest level pop-up idea of retailers, that it's the foot in the door, which actually emulates a lot of what food carts started as, which was it was the foot into an industry for so many. And I have seen sketches and I have seen ideas that play off of Park Avenue and 9th Avenue. And so from a transportation perspective, one, I think we think bigger than we ever felt like it was okay to think. I think we'd be okay with closing roads that we never thought we would be okay closing. And we look at that as an area that we can turn into not just the confines of the brick, what we know as the Brick Plaza today, but how do those two streets support something moving forward? And then also being very deliberate that if those adjacent buildings, and I'm particularly thinking like Pittock, who can make some choices, if we have some value proposition for them to inwardly face opening garage doors, that type of thing for some of the businesses that used to be there that are no longer there, that those are complementary retail opportunities that are tied directly into the park being successful, which I think you kind of see with Directors Park, which you kind of see at Jameson Park. It takes that, but we're going to have to incentivize it because it's not a natural progression right now. But I think there's a reason for us to do it, not just to activate the space, but it's actually an opportunity for first-time retailers to try something out new. And some of these ideas that are being bandied about are things I never would have thought of, but folks on the ground are feeling that right now. There's a tie in there to the park that I think needs to be complementary. But that's Prosper Portland. That's the city of Portland. That is us looking at what types of SDCs and other types of things. If you're going to do something that incorporates a complementary service, if you will, to an area, how can we make that an easier financial proposition?
So you're talking about incentivizing in terms of actually, grants or, financial help to, let's take the Piddock block, they've kind of bricked up a lot of their facing, windows. We're going to put apparently some diesel generators, backup generators for their telco facility on the north east corner of the building, so directly on the park. Do you think there's a play there for the city to offer some levels of financial subsidies or better permitting or something to maybe change the course of those things?
Yeah, imagine we're a world where one of my favorite cafes used to be right on the corner there. Imagine a world where the only thing preventing them from facing the park and being complimentary was they needed to get a permit from the design review that says they can have a retracting garage door that faces there instead of a solid wall or a solid glass wall, which is what they have now. Imagine a world where a Connex style travel trailer is occupying space on 9th Avenue, and it opens up wide ways, if you will, if that's a word. It opens up wide ways for a retailer to pop in and be there. We need to get away from, you can't vend, vending from the curbside. We need to get away from that. We need to get away from some of the old, like, I don't like how it looks feelings that go on, because I don't like how it looks doesn't work in your most challenging areas. We need basically anything that works, that somebody's willing to take a try there and be more open to it, is what my answer would be. So that involves the city questioning its permitting. It involves the city finding out where it can incentivize or make it easier or provide funding. I'll say, and I think Stephen's going to take this, but there is a question in your Q&A about those who have their windows broken. Is there a city insurance program? And while there's not insurance, the city does pay up to $10,000 for a business if they have their stuff smashed, that they can apply. We are loading that program with money every year more than we did previously because of the need. So, but that's the kind of thing we thought out, like, here's this need. It is worth us being involved in it. Let's get involved with it. Whereas it wasn't something we were involved in 10 years ago.
Great. Stephen,
I just want to say from a design standpoint, I'm at a disadvantage because I know I've seen pictures of the square. I'm not on the ground presently. I will be soon. That'll help a lot. But I mean, my reaction to the question was, you can line the park. You could even line the blank facades of the existing buildings, and then Eric jumps in. And I'm not used to hearing city initiatives that actually are taking chances. You can solve those problems by design, and everything you said, Eric, has happened other places in the form of kind of micro pop-ups or micro retail, kind of liner elements. And I can't wait to get there and show you that design can solve those problems. It just sounds like incentivization. And something you said made me think about, and again, I'm naive. I'm not talking to the building owners yet. We will be, I will be, many will be. But it may not take that much to make them better neighbors, not incentivize, but you want to be a better neighbor because we got a better vision for this place. And that's where the redesign or the reimagining O'Brien Square can get some of these people to play ball and get on board. I think that's how it happens. And it happens with the city not making it hard to do things. And you mentioned the word permitting. So again, your head's in the game. And that's exactly what you need from the municipality to make things happen.
Great. So a couple questions in the chat, or in the Q&A, sorry, that I'd like to address. I mean, the whole purpose of what we're doing with reimagining O'Brien Square is to bring people to the table. So the question about PNCA, yes, PNCA invited, there's creative energy there. We're inviting a lot of arts groups. And the hope is, that we can sort of organize this as a bit of a potluck, right? So, yes, food carts, might be part of the solution, pop-ups might be part of the solution, but that, there's also an opportunity to think about what kinds of cultural programming we can, do there. What, opera a la carte, the Portland Opera has a mobile, opera cart. That's going around the city all the time. Can we, set a schedule in which it's in O'Brien Square? What can people bring that they're already doing? And then how can we incentivize people to do more? So we've already got a couple grants out, hoping that we can, bring some money to that effort. And really, begin to make this a community space. I think it can operate in contrast and in complementary to Pioneer Courthouse Square. Pioneer Courthouse Square is awesome. I've been on the board for many years, always been a supporter of that. But it operates, on a rental basis, and that's how its income works. It does its best to bring, to lessen those rents for people and to bring other things in. But if we play this right, I think O'Brien Square can offer a really great local complement to it, much in the way that the food carts have offered a local complement to a lot of restaurants in the area. So that's what we're trying to do, is just really bring people to the table with the best ideas and then organize those ideas into some kind of coherent program. So I think that addresses a few of the questions. Question, does Stephen have any perspectives from a business standpoint on which streets should be closed to cars? Good question.
Wow. There were a time when I would have said, oh, I can't have the streets closed. I won't have parking. Boy, has it changed. I'm more than happy to have park closed right beside me. I'm more than happy to have 9th Avenue extended down as part of the Green Loop and closed. This is the new vitality that we're going to see in the future, where somebody's going to be able to walk and park their bike. And as we have the electrified scooters or whatever it is, when people are living closer to downtown, those are my customers that are going to be walking there. I don't necessarily need the car anymore to have the person parking right downtown. Now, I was actually one of the few retailers that supported the early days of paid meters on Sunday. Why? Because I needed the spaces turned over many, many times. It's changed, and I'm really, really looking forward to the possibility of having cool little retail pop-ups on the street, or maybe it's aligned with food carts. I'm open to any of those ideas. Times have changed.
I think, Randy, one thing we're also learning, though, a lot of people on this call may be familiar with the various pedestrian plazas that PBOT helped open across the city over the last couple of years. And this is where, you may see a street, one single block get painted, and stores or restaurants kind of expand into the right of way. It gets closed to traffic. There's some really great examples, but we've also learned that without every neighbor who faces that being involved in a positive way, or if you have quote unquote dead space, it very quickly can fall into disarray. And so up at 12th and Harvey Milk, Pride Plaza, eventually it's time for some construction to happen there, but also it was time to close it because not enough of the block was activated in a closed street situation, and it just became a new hangout. And so that is really important when we think about how we do this. There is a school of thought that says the city should close it, help you paint it, give you the permit to do it, and then we should walk away. And then there's another school of thought that says most folks who opened up a business on a street didn't also sign up for activating that street. And so there's a little bit of our involvement and improvement in terms of, I'll call it our recreation portfolio, that I would say we are looking at. Maybe we need to be better partners in that and not just throw you the keys and expect that you know how to do it, right? That there's a balance here. So we hear good things when we close streets, and there's positive stuff that happens thereafter. When we close streets and bad stuff happens, we hear badness about it. And Stephen, I think, his answer is one of those where it's not about the traditional things anymore. It's more about, is it going to be complementary or not? And it has to be complementary. If it's not, we're going to open it back up, because at least that we know how to deal with.
What's the thinking in the mayor's office about Ankeny Plaza, or the so-called park blocks, and how it can either complement or be switched over? I mean, today I heard several things about how it should just be wholesale moved from its current location. For those of you who don't know the space, It's a little food cart pod, that is on basically 9th and Burnside, and a little kind of a jewel of a little park there that has suffered from similarly sort of unsupportive surrounding uses and then all the things other things that have impacted other parks. But it's a little food cart pod now, depending on who you talk to, either pretty successful after a really rough period. The food cart owners themselves saying this, the ones who've been able to stick it out, and then other people who think it hasn't been enough of a success and it should be moved. What's the current thinking around that? Because there's been a lot of investment in that little pod.
Yeah, certainly a hell of a lift, for everybody involved to try, a lifeline really for trying to keep some aspect of food carts alive in that area at probably the worst time in our modern history to try and do it. So the challenges abound, that location. The folks who have put their time and effort into that location, I think they're doing God's work to keep it there, but it has been challenging. And in a world where the public health authority on the county and state side are changing the rules as we speak in terms of what the plumbing infrastructure looks like, instead of doing we'll get into the depths of food cart life here, but most of the food carts you've all gone to at some point or another, they either carry their gray water on their truck or they have a service that comes and pumps these big white tanks out from the back. You usually don't see it because you're buying from the sidewalk. At that place, you might see it, but those are phased out now by the health authority. So that means you have to have the infrastructure, meaning pipes into the ground around that. And that park is not set up for that right now. It is also challenged because food carts, they thrive in, I use the term again, critical mass, right? This is why food carts are complementary to each other. You go for food carts, not a specific cart, and everybody that you go with gets something that they want. So getting more people there is important. And with as busy of a road as that is, and the points to get into it, it's a very challenging location. So I think I'm very glad they're there. I've been several times myself, but if we as local governments, state, county, city, if we're changing the rules on them all the time, I don't know how you get ahead. That's problematic for us. It's problematic for them. What I think, there are different ideas about what the future looks like for them. But my hope is, I hope it's tied into whatever happens at O'Brien because of there's a natural proximity there that needs to be complementary. But it's challenging. And I think Keith and the other vendors there are the ones that probably can answer that the best. I think the mayor's office is open to different perspectives right now on that. We haven't made up a mind on that perspective yet.
Randy, one quick comment on that. I did talk to Keith just yesterday at the Economic Forum. There are a couple of new carts coming to that pod. I think that the support of that pod until they figure out the sewage treatment issue is still important. It's actually a vital service. Employees need a place to eat lunch, and we have to have these type of services. We actually now have a stocked break room downstairs because the employees can't afford to, a $15 lunch. So, and a number of small restaurants going. So the food carts are essential also to keeping the services going. Not only do they draw tourists, but it's also for those of us that work downtown. And I'm actually excited to see, that pod is actually straight down Park Avenue. So that's a nice extension. That's why I said, even if it was parked next to my store that was closed in the future or 9th, it didn't matter because these are essential.
Randy, in one of the previous webinars, the statement was made that the lunch hour or the lunch push, that those days are dead relative to what O'Brien and the food cart scene used to be. I have to fundamentally disagree with that, and I would challenge it. If you go to Happy Valley, if you go to Beaverton, who have, I'd say, the 2020 version of food cart pods, they're busy, and they're busy on the weekends, and they're busy Monday through Friday. And then also, as we do better at getting more workers back into downtown, that need is there that Stephen's talking about. So we're not in the mayor's office. We are not working from the assumption that lunch hour is a dead need in the community anymore. It's just fundamentally false.
There's a question, it's interesting. Does the panel think a destination park where it has a specific use that's highly valued by specific people, particularly one that doesn't need active programming, would be a good direction for O'Brien's design? So the examples given are a skate park or a dog park. And as we heard previously, maybe the one thing between the clients of the Behavioral Health Resource Center and the Ritz developers is the notion of the need for a dog park. They all have dogs, and surely the folks who will be in the upper floors of the Ritz will have dogs. So not getting fixated on dog park, but other kinds of one-time uses. I've also heard, or destination uses. I've also heard this from Portland Parks and Rec in terms of bringing a recreation use to there.
I think I'm probably in the spot to answer that the best. I've heard the dog park. I think it's a great idea. I'm not opposed, just on a personal level, opposed to a skate park either, but I think a challenge with that one will be the 24/7. We use the word programming, but it's the 24/7. Try not to get people to just pop up and make that the new place to smoke. Like that just cannot be the case. And whatever leads to that falls into the category of a bad idea for me. So I think a dog park, because of how open it is and because of the users, that one, I guess, pops a little bit higher as maybe being potential because our park rangers can enforce there. I don't know enough about skate parks to be able to answer that effectively, but whatever allows antisocial behavior to happen all the time can't happen here if we want this to be good, because we just don't have the resources to plop police officers there 24/7. So permanent structures, open, where you can see all the way through the area, very important.
Randy?
I want to say,
oh,
I want to say that I really like that, that question. And there's really sort of an answer in that question. Is a destination use a good idea? The answer is yes, it's a great idea once we figure out what works and what that use is. But what destination uses do, and it's going to be a good homework for me to think about between now and when we get to Portland and start kicking ideas around. Destination uses galvanize constituencies that support something, take care of something, pay for something. They also, deliver an identity which then feeds on itself. And it doesn't have to be, destination use doesn't mean it's all dog park and nothing else. It's a start. So there's something really good. There's a seed in that question. And again, I'm not going to guess too early on what that is, but what the use is, but the idea of identity, building constituencies, starting with, something that can be marketed. It's all good. It's a good thought.
Randy, I'd like to make a comment regarding like skate park. I see skateboarders in that park all the time, almost every single day, whether there's a bit of fence up or not. And guess what? I don't see any problems. I don't see any vandalism. I absolutely love it having those guys over there. And you know what's interesting? Skate parks don't necessarily have to be a big pit in the hole in the ground with concrete. It can be unusual, a design of rails down the side and maybe some cleats removed from a particular curb or a ramp off to the side. And maybe it's sometimes just a few designated hours and come have fun and play. I think that even part of that street could be engaged into the park area for those skateboarders. So destination for any of these sports or activities, I think need to be thought about out of the box. For a number of years, I live across from Alberta Park, and I can remember advocating not just for the first off-leash park there, but for the first walking path, but also for the very first time when we actually had bike hockey going on in our tennis court, and I was advocating for that as the chair of Friends of the Alberta Park. It was so much fun seeing that happen, and it's all come through came through a time when there was all sorts of gang activity there. That's all gone, and the activation of these destinations where they were one day a tennis court, a next day some type of a bike hockey, and the next day, who knows, it's pickleball.
So I want to end our discussion with a question, a challenge. So you would be hard put to find a space that is more surrounded by and when the Ritz opens, more surrounded by the fundamental inequities in our current society. On one side you have this amazing cluster of hotels that will now be anchored by the Ritz. Already destination retailing starting to move in. Stephen's going to soon have a neighbor of a soft goods brand. And then on the other side you have and some amazing, the food hall in the Ritz is going to have an amazing array of local vendors. It's going to be a great addition, to the city, and to the, to the street life of the city and that new plaza. Then on the other side, literally catty corner, you have a cluster of social services, and these are valued social services. New Avenues for Youth has been there for 18 years. Central City Concern, has been there nearly as long. And they're not going away. And there's affordable housing in the neighborhood, deeply affordable housing in the neighborhood, and in downtown in general. The predominant housing stock in the central city is not high-end condos; it's affordable housing. So how does this park serve people who don't have a lot of money and maybe are facing challenges but are not breaking any laws?
Okay, I'll jump first, you gentlemen.
Brave of you. Brave of
Right.
you. Thank you.
Okay, Randy, okay, very tough question, but also it gets at the heart of it, which is that we've got all types, and we've got all types who are in the open spaces today who are very challenged. And how do we create spaces where they're welcome, where it's not just about money, where you have open space, which should be enjoyable. I think we need to very seriously dissect and get serious as a city when it comes to the type of open drug use that we're going to be okay with. And that challenges some of our norms in Portland. And I think it's okay for us to admit it, that we're just not okay anymore, that what we're putting up with is not something that we want to see. It's something that most of us are no longer going to parks for because we're inundated with what I'm going to use the term antisocial behavior, smoking meth and fentanyl in the park, and then losing your mind in the midst of that park is not something that we should be okay with, and we aren't designing a park around that. Then when it comes to spaces in Portland, I think we have a damn good history of Pioneer Place, of Directors Park, and you can go and enjoy that place without spending money. You can go to Irving Park and enjoy that without spending any money. As a kid at Selwood Park, as a kid in Westmoreland or other places, anytime you went to any of these parks, Woodstock Park is a place I spent a lot of my childhood. I never spent a dime there, but I was also, my folks, my grandparents, they felt confident knowing that if bad stuff was going there, somebody was going to respond and say, you can't do that in the park. I think we just need to start saying what needs to be said on this. And that might make folks uncomfortable, but I don't think it takes a lot to design around that. I think that's actually the genesis of what parks are about. We have given up the territory, and I think we need to be done giving up that territory. And that means, from a city perspective, our park rangers are getting more serious about it. Our police are getting more serious about it. The DA needs to get more serious about it. And we need help. We are one arm of enforcing against those antisocial behaviors, those criminal behaviors. But these folks who are having this type of drug effect, they need desperate access to treatment. They need a hell of a lot more beds than 8 beds for treatment. That is Oregon Health Authority, it's Multnomah County, that we as a public, as a city, we are subject to the social things that are going on in our society. And this type of drug is affecting us in a way that most of us have no way to wrap our head around. And that's forcing us to design parks in, like, we're using environmental design to prevent certain types of behavior instead of treating the folks who are addicted to this damning substance, right? There's something about that I think we just need to be really upfront about.
Eric, you said something earlier that is sort of a corollary that could be tacked on to what you just said, because I think you're getting a lot of responses that are, kind of buying into your challenge or your charge there. But you said that this should be a place of joy. Places of joy are what parks can be and generally have been. And if they're joyful, people want to be in them. And if people want to be in them, then more people want to be in them, and they start to self-police. I mean, there's a whole psychology about making a great place, and then people will take care of it because it is a great place, versus a piece of crap that you can kind of get away with stuff, and then people think you can get away with stuff and they let it kind of go downhill. So we should have, high aspirations, and it should be a super desirable place to be. And then you might start getting people to behave. Again, a little Pollyannish, but you got to start with that kind of theory.
Ambassador of optimism, anything to close with?
Well, there is a lot of opportunity, isn't there? And I'm just glad to be right across the street. I can't wait to see what's going to take place. There's a bright future. And I think we do have to think out of the box, Eric. You're absolutely right. And I think that the challenge, not only is it the drugs and the homelessness and the mental crisis, but it's also engaging all of those that work in this area and getting them involved as well. It's at the employee level. It's at the those that are in the residential buildings. So our outreach has to continue, and there are more webinars. There's more open houses, and I'm looking forward to them all.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. So please tune in Monday night, where we will have a session on basically mobile architecture and tactical urbanism, as it's sometimes called, temporary urbanism, with Jennifer Siegel, who's from Office of Mobile Design in Santa Barbara. She's based, but primarily works in Los Angeles. Brilliant designer. Art Pierce from PBOT, who has guided the city from strategic level in terms of the street plazas. And then Keith Jones, who has been literally, I don't want to say battling it, but sometimes I think he has, with trying to move the green loop forward, and then also has really been the force behind the Ankeny food cart pod that we were talking about earlier. And then our last in our series, I'm really excited about as well, which is really focusing on forms of civic engagement to create space. And we're going to have Damon Rich from Newark, New Jersey, who is an amazing thinker, and Kareem Hassaneem from Colocate, which is a really interesting design firm that has a foot in New Orleans and in Portland. That is really a justice design firm. They're doing really interesting work with, for instance, with Jefferson High School and PCC. And then lastly, Kelsey Snook, who is an interactive designer who works all over the world. She's amazing. So it'll be a great night for really thinking about ways to activate the park that could lead to more design ideas and more good things. So thank you all, and we'll see you on Monday. And Chris, I'll see you, I think, on March 6th in actual 3 dimensions. So, or March 7th, anyway.
Well, you'll see me on Monday too. I just won't be on the screen.
Okay, yeah. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being here.